Hi everyone and welcome. Today I'm going to be working on a watercolor painting for the last page of my sketchbook. But before we get into that, I would like to give a shout out to Tari, who is the comment of the week. Thank you so much for your comment. I really like reading all those comments, and if you would like a shout out in the video, all you have to do is leave a comment. That could have been you. For the last few sketchbooks, I've been just redrawing whatever the first drawing in the sketchbook was. This time I did a watercolor painting, which is on my channel if you'd like to check it out. So it's like, you know what, I'm just going to continue doing what I've been doing for the last like 2 or 3 sketchbooks and just redraw that first painting. First thing that I did was do some warm up sketches of the character that I was going to be drawing. I also used these sketches to help me get an idea of what I wanted to draw. Of course it is a redraw, but I kind of wanted to do something just a touch different from the original drawing. So I was like, you know what, let me just sketch out my ideas first before I actually jump into the drawing. And it was also really helpful because I had one other page that I needed to fill in the sketchbook. I'm working in a standard artist loft sketchbook, and the paper is not made for watercolors, it's just for sketching. So what I ended up doing was taking a sheet from my Strathmore Vision watercolor pad and just cutting it down to size so that I could fit it in this sketchbook, and at the end I'm just going to paste it into it. This is really helpful not only because the paper that's in the sketchbook is not waterproof, but also if I wanted to redraw this or like start over, I could, because it's not in the sketchbook yet. I'll be putting it in later. I've been doing this sort of thing all throughout the sketchbook. Just whenever I draw something outside of my sketchbook, I've just been pasting it into the sketchbook. It's really nice because, like I mentioned earlier, this paper is not mixed media, so it's not suitable for some of the art supplies that I use, like markers and watercolors, and that's all I use. I want to use more color in my sketchbook, and this is the compromise that I have made to be able to do that. I really hate it when markers bleed onto the other side, and it just kind of affects how the layout of the other side looks, because it's like now it's just like this huge ink stain in the middle of the page or whatever, and I gotta figure out how to cover that up or whatever. So to just be able to draw whatever it is outside of the sketchbook and to just paste it in, it's a lot nicer. I'm using a Micron pen for the Lineart in the size 0.5. I got this Micron back in October, and I'm super new to Microns. The only other pens that I've ever used for Lineart have been the Copic ones, and what else? There's another one. I think I've used Stabilo. I don't think that one's waterproof though, which wouldn't help me in this situation because I'm watercolor painting. And what else have I used? Oh, I used to use ballpoint pens for watercolor liner almost exclusively. The other one that I've been using for a few years has been the Tombow ABT brush pen. It has a pretty firm nib for a brush pen, which is super helpful for me because I'm kind of heavy-handed at times. But I've kind of gotten away from using it recently for no reason other than I just want to switch things up. I want to try something new. Is that a crime? Of course it's not a crime. I can do what I want. Anyways, the Micron's really nice. I like it. I think I might want to get a larger nib size, like maybe a 0.8 or something for larger drawings like this. However, the 0.5 I feel is just like a nice middle ground for kind of larger pieces and just little doodles in my sketchbook. You know what, I called this a watercolor painting towards the beginning of this, and it's actually not. It's actually mixed media. I just kind of forgot. But for the watercolor portion of this drawing, I'm using Holbein Watercolors, which have been my watercolor of choice for a few years. I really like these paints. They're nice and vibrant, and they don't feather too much, which I know feathering is something that a lot of watercolorists like, but I don't. I don't like feathering because I like to have a little more control with my paints. You know, I like to put them in a particular place and they stay there. They don't decide to migrate all over the drawing, you know. So the Holbeins work for me. I got these paints back in 2018, and I also got the palette that he put the paints in back in 2018, and we're still going strong. I haven't had to purchase any new tubes. I got a 24 set, and then I added a quinacridone rose because it was such a fun, bright paint. pink, which was one of the main colors that I used for this painting. It was for the underpainting, the blushy areas, and also for her sweater. I also used ultramarine, which both of those colors, quinacridone rose and ultramarine, are very cool tones. So I was like, you know what, that's perfect for what I'm going for. And they were also the colors that I used for the original piece. The only difference between this, well, not the only difference, there's a few differences, but one of the differences between the color palette in this painting and the original is her skin tone is a lot more warm, and I definitely used a lot more saturated colors for her skin tone, which I kind of have mixed feelings about, because in some ways I feel like maybe it's a little too saturated, but overall I think it turned out pretty decent. So I've gotten these back in 2018 and I haven't had to purchase any tubes, and those weren't like full-size tubes, they were like the little mini ones. That's incredible. 7 years strong. That's really nice. I do need to re-up on some of the colors that I use for skin tones. I think like burnt umber, mineral violet, and there's a couple others I can't remember off the top of my head. Like, I'm really glad that I made that investment early on, because now I can use nice quality paints and I don't have to keep buying new ones, because I don't like, oh, I use these I don't like, and I'm ready to try some, but I don't have to do that because I really like these ones. To kind of quickly go back to the whole, oh, I think the face is a little too saturated thing. The thing that I think caused that is I used those vibrant colors and I maybe just put down a little too much. I didn't water them down enough, and so when I was layering over top of those colors, I was like, those other colors are kind of really popping through. So I kind of had to correct those a little bit, and I did that with markers and Prismacolors, which is something I've been doing a little more recently. Like just whenever I'm like, oh, that's the color I meant to use, that's all right, I have other materials that I can use that I could just layer on top of the painting and correct things. So that's fun. I mainly use the markers to kind of deepen some of the shadow areas and also to color the earrings. And I think I used it in the hair a little bit. I can't remember. It's been like a week since I painted this. I'm not gonna hold you. Touching up watercolor paintings with alcohol markers is something that I started doing, I think, in like 2018, 2019. I was making a piece for an art competition. Basically, I just didn't use enough layers for the skin tone that I was painting, and I was like, oh, they're looking mighty ashy, and I was like also a little too afraid to like actually go back over the painting with watercolors. So I was like, you know what, I know what I'll do. I'll take some Copic markers and I'll just kind of color over things. And I was like, wow, that works a lot. And I've been doing that ever since. Just whenever I'm like, this is not quite what I want, but I maybe don't want to do more layers of watercolor, you know, just pull out a couple other supplies. And once you do pull out a couple more supplies, then suddenly it's mixed media, because I used more than just watercolors. At least that's how I think that works. I'm pretty sure that's how that works. So I used the markers to deepen the shadows, and then I used Prismacolors to lighten up some other areas to kind of make it look less flat, which is really nice to be able to do that. It's like digital art layers, but in real life. This is also where things get a little tricky, because unlike digital art layers, you cannot delete your marks once you put them down. So it's a little scary, but it's worth the risk. Sometimes it's worth the risk, sometimes it's not. Sometimes I maybe overwork a piece a little too much and I'm like, oof, I should have stopped like 2 or 3 layers ago. I'm in too deep. Which was starting to happen with this one. I started pulling out an orange Prismacolor, and that's when I really knew that I was taking things a little too far. So I had to put those up, and I decided to call it finished. So it was time to sign it and also write the date, which is something I didn't used to do in my sketchbooks, but ever since I started doing it, I'm like, I can't not do this, because it's really fun to know like when I started something, you know? I use Posca Pens for that portion of the drawing. They're really nice. They're just like paint pens that you can just paint over stuff with. I don't know what to say about that. But anyways, so this is what the 2 drawings look like side by side. But now it's time to paste the last page on the last page, which is technically not the last page, because there's another side to this page, which I was going to leave blank, but then I kind of felt bad about it because I'm like, oh, this is a perfectly fine page. So I did end up doing some more sketches on the actual last page of the sketchbook. I'm using Tombow Aqua Mono liquid glue to paste this into the sketchbook. It dries pretty quickly and it goes on clear, dries clear, and it's really easy to use. It has two ends. It's double-ended. I only use the broad part though. But anyways, that's that. I finally finished this sketchbook. Inshallah, I'll be uploading a sketchbook tour very soon, but if you can't wait, oh my goodness, you can't wait? It is available on my Patreon. You can purchase access to the entire sketchbook, or you can just join the $5 tier. I post sketch dumps over there twice a month, and I also put notes on each and every page of the sketchbook, so if that's something you're interested in, there's a link to my Patreon in the description. Speaking of Patreon, shout out to my patrons, Marymount Illustrations, Sister Donna55, and Kelsey. Thank you so much for being my patrons. I really appreciate you and everything you do. Wow, oh my goodness. Here are a couple more videos that I think you would like, and I will see you next time.